Hey everybody, it's Lavender Town, and today I want to talk a little bit about art school expectations and realities. So first off, let's talk about life drawing. Now, life drawing is the practice of drawing a model who is completely naked while they're posing for you for usually about an hour or so. It's something that art schools have been doing since they were founded basically, and it's a really good practice because you learn a lot about the way that people are actually structured. Clothes really hide a lot of that, and so seeing people completely naked helps a lot. But obviously, pop culture has a real fun time with this whole concept because, nudity can be so exciting for a TV show or movie or whatever. So typically, the models in these life drawing classes when it comes to pop culture are super mainstream attractive. So for example, there's a scene in I think it's one of the Traveling Pants movies where there's a life drawing class and the guy looks like a straight up Abercrombie and Finch model. But in reality, almost every life drawing class I ever stepped into typically had a guy who looked a lot more like Santa. And this fact may sound disappointing to you, but when you really think about it, it's actually way better. I found it so refreshing the first time I took life drawing because I was seeing people who had all kinds of flaws all over their body, like they had stretch marks, moles, scars, all these different things, and their skin would actually fold over. It wouldn't be photoshopped into a Barbie smooth where there's absolutely no creases on it or anything like that. But after you draw someone like that for a while, you start to really appreciate what's beautiful about body types that aren't exactly model-like. We all understand that model type bodies are supposed to be beautiful and we acknowledge them as such, but it was a really cool experience actually seeing a regular unphotoshopped person and seeing every little detail that makes them unique. It's also just better because obviously we have so many reference pictures that we could get off the internet of people who are of the body type that we expect to see everywhere. So it's actually really, you're in a much better shape if you have a model who isn't a Playboy bunny, because if you need to look up reference of a Playboy bunny, there's decades and decades of photos of that. So don't be too disappointed. It's actually a good thing. So art classes are often depicted with students sitting outside, sitting on the grass with their easels in their lap, and they're drawing or painting the sky and the trees, and there's flowers around, and it's just a beautiful scene. Now, in reality, while there are going to be a few classes where you get to go outside and paint the outside world, you're going to have an equal or greater amount of classes where you're sitting in front of a tiny screen and your eyes are super bloodshot and you've been up for 24 hours and you're just trying to make little tweaks onto your animation project or whatever, and it's not going to be aesthetic at all. In fact, in stark contrast to this expectation, there were actually multiple days where I never saw the sun because I lived pretty high up into the northern hemisphere up in Canada, and so the sun wasn't out for very long, especially during the winter months when I was mostly in school. And our classes were super, super long. So usually I think a college class runs between an hour and 30 minutes to 2 hours. But at art school, we had studio classes and those usually ran for 6 hours. Now, you would also sometimes stay after school to continue working on your stuff, just because, especially if it's a big messy project and you've got all your stuff out already, if you know that you're going to have to do it anyway, you might as well just finish it up. So there were a lot of times that we were in class for something 9 to 12 hours. You'd stay there, you'd go there at 9 a.m. or something like that, and then you wouldn't leave until around 9 p.m. So it was not the sitting outside of the grass experience that I had pictured when I first started looking into art school. So a lot of people, even if they're not going to art school, but just going off to university in general, expect that, especially if they're single when they leave high school, like a lot of people are, they expect that they'll be able to find a better relationship in college than they could in high school. Now, this makes perfect sense because you're going to be around a lot of new young people who are about, the same age as you and have similar interests to you because they'll be in your same major. So it makes a lot of sense. But in art school, if you are someone who's interested in guys, you might find that it's a bit harder than you may have predicted, because at least in my art school, and I know in some other art schools this is also true, it's about 80% female classmates. So if you are someone who's interested only in guys, your dating options are going to be very limited. Now, we actually shared a campus with an engineering school, which had about the reverse demographics. So it was always interesting seeing the classes let out, and when ACAD left, it was like a sea of girls, and then when people at SATE left their classes, it was a sea of guys. It almost looked like it was a boys and girls school, but it totally wasn't. Now, this might sound like a total Shangri-La situation for all the guys who actually were at the school, but instead of being, surrounding themselves in all the girls that were everywhere, they actually tended to huddle up and clump together in solidarity and usually hang out in some corner of the classroom away from the rest of the girls, which was really strange. I was really surprised by that. Now, of course, there were some guys who totally didn't do that and became friends with like all of us, but yeah, there was always like a set of like 3 to 5 guys in every class who would clump together on their own and just sort of stay segregated from the rest of us. Now, I could make a whole video just talking about what art teachers are actually like, and I actually did. My 5 types of art teachers video will be in the end card if you want to watch that. But I just wanted to really quickly talk about the thing I was most surprised about when it came to art school teachers, and that was that art school teachers are a lot younger than I expected. I expected a lot of like grizzled old, like old masters kind of guys, like people you'd expect in an art school, like with a big beard and, sort of teaching you the basics and stuff like that. When in reality, a majority of my teachers were relatively young, like in their 30s. And they were usually all stressed out over their own deadlines and projects, which really cracked me up because I expected my teachers to be relatively low-key because I expected them to just be teaching, but most of the teachers at our school were still professionals in their field. So a lot of the time they'd come in and they'd be like, "Don't even talk to me right now. I have so much to do and I need to get this done," which kind of sounds like a bad thing, I guess, if you wanted them to actually teach you and focus on you that class, but it's also a good thing because they can actually give you real insight on what it's actually like to be a professional right now in the field, which I think is hugely helpful. I think some art schools who have teachers who've retired from their field, sometimes they get sort of out-of-date information about how the industry works, and you're not getting out-of-date information if you're actually seeing your teacher embroiled in the industry while they're teaching you. So that was really interesting. In fact, we had crits sometimes that were extra harsh because a teacher had a deadline coming up and we could see that they hadn't slept. So they were like super grumpy and were like freaking out. And you always knew if someone was like brought to tears during a crit, it was probably because the teacher was super stressed out and were totally taking it out on all the students. It was a surprising thing for me. I just always pictured, some relatively relaxed old guy teaching me how to paint, not a bunch of relatively young professional people like freaking out over all their own projects and trying to finish them in our class. This last expectation is kind of bad news, and I hate to be the bearer of it, but I have to tell you this. This is really important, and a lot of people don't understand this about art school. Now, when I pictured going to art school, I thought that very quickly I was going to be able to start breaking into the stuff that I really wanted to work on. Now, that's like, for me, character design and storytelling and comics. It's like my greatest, passion. All of those things I love so much, and I love cartoons especially. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't totally naive. I knew there were going to be a lot of things that I was going to have to do that were more basic, like, drawing and shading and making landscapes and things like that. I knew that was going to be part of my school experience, but what I totally didn't understand was that my whole first year and a majority of my second year, I was not going to get to draw in my style at all. It was going to be entirely straight up representational art, like realistic drawings of like the botanical garden. That was a big assignment. Realistic drawings of landscapes, realistic drawings of shapes, just like vases and things like that. And that wasn't just going to be the first couple weeks like I expected. That was actually going to be like a year and a half of my education. I tried to slip in little bits of fun, I guess, and character wherever I could, but I constantly had to beg to be allowed to do that, and oftentimes I was penalized for it, and it kind of drove me crazy. There were a lot of points in first year when I was like, what am I doing all this for? Like, I'm drawing shapes over and over and shading these shapes, and I had no problem doing basic stuff, but the problem was that I wasn't ever allowed to do any of the stuff that I actually came there to do. Now, this really changed for the better when I got into third and fourth year, and by fourth year, they were kind of letting you direct yourself and would just try to give you advice on the projects that they knew you already wanted to make. But it was a long road to get to there, and don't be too discouraged if you're in your first year or even your second year and you're not getting a lot of projects that you feel like are directly related to what you want to do. It's very possible that in your later years you'll have the freedom to start working on those. Let me know if there's any expectations you had that turned out to be different when you went to art school, or if you haven't already been there, let me know of some expectations that you have in the comments, and I will try to look through them and confirm or deny whether they are true or not. Have a great day, and I will see you next time. Thank you to all of my patrons, new and old, including Scott Peterson, Christy Stewart, Paynamel, The Artsy Moose, Elizabeth Alvin, Kampompon, Okamore, Matthew Kunke, Blep, Sergeant Pendulum, Shiori, Lena Christine, Sweet 12, Ikiwas, Taka, Isabella Spooky, Lachlan MD, Mystic, Enzo Jobert, Your Boy ST, JJ Jade, Leblabla, and Addy Visual.